To talk about the creation of the musical and its subsequent development over the years, it's my very great pleasure to welcome to the program via Zoom. From Canada, we have the award-nominated children's TV writer, story editor and performer, Andrew Sabiston. Greetings, Andrew.
Greetings, Rob. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. And from Los Angeles in California, it's my pleasure to welcome the award-winning composer and orchestrator for film, television and video games, Timothy Williams. Greetings, Timothy.
Greetings to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well indeed, and this is my first interview over 3 different time zones. Well, I'm in one, and you two gentlemen in separate time zones indeed. So I live in your future, so to speak, because it's only Friday afternoon and evening in your respective cities.
You do, and here's a very interesting thing that just struck Tim and I like a lightning bolt last night. Today in Australia is March 23rd.
Indeed.
As fate would have it, that is 30 years to the day that we had our premiere here in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So we thank you so much, Rob, for your interest in marking this anniversary.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I guess 30 years ago, you didn't really realise how far Napoleon would go. And interesting to note, it actually began as a 1-hour musical back in 1982, after you both met in high school.
That's right.
So, yeah, a long time ago.
So what was the background behind the creation of the musical? Had you both had an interest in musical theatre prior to that? I know that you were an actor, Andrew, and you were a classical pianist, Timothy.
Yeah, we were huge fans of both Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita, and both of those were incredibly inspiring to us. And it also seemed to us that if one were to write a musical, it would be about a historical figure because it was Jesus Christ and Eva Perón. So that was what led us to think, well, you know, why don't we try our own musical about some historical figure? And we narrowed it down to a few people, Elizabeth I and Napoleon. And I think there was someone else kicking around as well. But the story of Napoleon is fascinating. It's an incredible time in history, and it's an incredible natural rise and fall story. So to us, it felt the most interesting one to sort of adapt into a performance where you could really have a rise and then a sort of a tragic fall to the character.
Mm-hmm. We'd been studying both Julius Caesar and King Lear in school. And, you know, the political drama in Julius Caesar and that tale of ambition was very compelling to us, and felt timeless. I mean, the world is still grappling with these themes. And in King Lear, what we found very, very moving was the tragic story of this man who fails to learn the value of love until it's too late. So in this, we saw the makings of a great tragic story in what history gave us with Napoleon, the incredible love story with Napoleon and Josephine, and one heck of an Act One ender where Napoleon, who starts off his journey an incredibly good, noble character, goes too far and takes the crown and crowns himself emperor. And for that was just like, boom, we were sold.
And interesting to note that the Schoenberg and Babel Les Miserables, well, it premiered in French in France, Paris in 1980, but the English version didn't come out until 1985. Was that a sort of impetus for you to develop your musical, seeing the success of Les Miserables?
Weirdly, it was the other way around. We were in development on our show, and Les Mis was something that came out after we were fairly well into what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And there was the good and the bad. You know, the good was obviously there was keen interest in this time period. The bad was that now the time period had been examined. You know, Les Mis takes place about 80 years after our story, but obviously that began to eke into kind of the area that we were trying to work in. So, but you know, Les Mis is one of my favorite shows. So,
absolutely.
You know,
we had the pleasure in London of meeting both Alain Boublil and Claude Mistel Schoenberg. They came to see the show, and they gave us some invaluable feedback that decades later we've embraced. A musical can be a very long journey. You have this with Hadestown, the story of Hadestown, which took 10 years to develop. Chicago, which wasn't a great success in its first outing, only to come back 19 years later as a revival and still be playing around the world to this day. So one never knows what the journey is going to be, but this one has been very exciting. And we had our Toronto production in 94. We had our London production directed by the incredible Francesca Zambello in 2000. Then nothing happened with it for a decade. And then we were invited to have that production done at a small theater north of Toronto with the director Richard Izunian. And Richard wanted to do the Jonathan Tunick orchestration, which in Jonathan Tunick, we had been very fortunate. He had worked with us and orchestrated Napoleon in London, and he is Stephen Sondheim's orchestrator. And it was a thrill to work with him. And Richard was proposing that we do an in-concert version of that score. And Tim and I thought, we have a different idea. And we said, how about we use this opportunity as a public workshop for a new concept we've been thinking of for the show. And Richard immediately became very interested in this. And he said, well, pitch me. And Tim and I pitched him our reimagining of the show, which now tells it through the eyes of the character Talleyrand, who is like a Salieri character in Amadeus, a very Machiavellian operator with a deep, dark secret. And that is the story driver of our new show.
Was that original concept, or did you have a pattern, for instance, Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar telling the story through his eyes?
Well, originally, we toyed with this idea of having Talleyrand be the narrator, and then we backed away from it. And the Toronto version and the London version were more of a bio-musical. They were telling the story of Napoleon, putting it up on the stage and telling it in a theatrical way. But we didn't have a central theatrical overarching concept of someone's confession, someone's story, this character who history gives us, who is a fascinating character, who people don't know much about, but boy, is he ever a dark operator. And people really liked him in Toronto and in London. And we got the note we got from people was like, oh, I want to see more Talleyrand. So this is what we embraced. And we had that initial outing of the new concept in 2010. That got invited to the New York Music Theater Festival in 2015. And that version in turn went on to Seoul, where it has had 3 productions. It's had 2 full-scale productions, one in Korean, one in French with an incredible French cast, which happened just last May, and a concert version that happened the summer before.
And Timothy, you trained as a classical pianist. Did you have any influences from some of the classical French composers in composing the score, or did you have your own ideas as to what direction it would take?
Yeah, the score is very pseudo-classical. Up until that point, I was sort of spending half my time as a pianist and half my time as a composer. And so delving into something of that period of time, it was very nice to draw upon, just the inspiration of a lot of that, period of time. You had Beethoven, who even dedicated his Emperor Symphony before scratching it off, very annoyed. But, our coronation scene is definitely very inspired by Carmina Burana, with that kind of big sense of that sort of, we view the coronation not as something good. We see it as quite a huge sort of ominous warning. So it has that sort of scale to it. So it felt very appropriate to sort of draw in a little bit of that classical color and language into it. That said, it still plays very much like a more modern musical. We've been able to watch it in front of an audience. I think that's a big clue when you're watching it. Are there places where the audience is shifting in their seats and looking at the program, or is it holding their attention? And I think it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly if you've got somewhere that's dead. Take your moments for your ballads, but you also need to keep the thing moving along and have those sort of more energetic numbers. In the latest show, we've had the opportunity to go over and watch it and see how people are responding. And we've written 4 or 5 new numbers specifically for these new productions. A lot of what was originally written for Toronto, quite a bit of that has remained or is there in some way, shape, or form in what we currently see on stage. But again, it's been a really great opportunity to create new chorus numbers. We wrote a new solo for Josephine called One Day. We just felt like we weren't giving enough of her backstory of where she was coming from. And, that's the nice thing about the show is there have been so many wonderful opportunities to see it. There was a phenomenal production in the Netherlands as well that Andrew got to go out and see. And
that was in the summer of 2022, and it was its Dutch language premiere. And it was done by an incredibly passionate amateur company in the town of Zoetermeer, Holland. But just the most rewarding show to see and performances to see. And We always learn something from seeing a show. In that show, what Tim's alluding to, the new Josephine ballad called One Day, this came out of watching that production and actually talking to the actress playing Josephine and hearing her thoughts about the character, just saying, I wish her backstory were more present. And boy, Josephine's backstory is incredible. She came from Martinique, and a fortune teller told her when she was a 17-year-old girl, a fortune teller told her that one day she would become a woman greater than a queen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is incredible. I mean, and it happens. I mean, she becomes an empress, indeed, greater than a queen.
It's such a tricky story to tell. You know, the subject matter is one of those things where it doesn't work well as an elevator pitch. When you say, oh, we've done a musical about Napoleon, people go, well, I don't quite get that concept. And yet, when people go and see the show, they get it, that it is this sort of Shakespearean drama where it really is about a character and the overwhelming temptation of ambition and power that is part of the human condition. When you have that much power, you have that much wealth, how does that affect you? How does it change you? How does it affect the way you treat those around you, those nearest and dearest to you? And at what point do you start sacrificing those relationships to, achieve even bigger goals? It becomes a universal sort of character study. And I think that's what makes it compelling for people, that it's not about a historical figure. It's a drama in very much the same way as a Shakespearean sort of Julius Caesar or King Lear or something like that, where it's not so much about the historical character as the human being that experienced this.
It's the human story. And when people ask us what Napoleon, our musical, is about, we say, well, it's about the value of love and relationship, and that without those things in your life, we are broken. Mm-hmm. And that is indeed what happens to Napoleon. He casts his beloved brother out of his life. He casts Josephine out of his life, and he winds up a broken man. And that's the tragic arc of his journey, starting off as this firebrand, blazing comet hero, so inspiring at the beginning of his career. And then with Talleyrand's guidance in our story, and historically, because Talleyrand was there at every crucial decision Napoleon made, including divorcing Josephine, including taking the crown. He's quite serpent-like in the way he makes these suggestions to Napoleon. And Napoleon follows those because he's driven by the need to succeed. And it's only at the end of his life that he realizes he's lost everything.
Mm-hmm. So it sort of comes down to the idea that power corrupts, I guess.
You got
exactly.
It. That's right.
In a nutshell, exactly that.
Yeah, the human story. And that's the thing. It cannot be just a march through history. Especially for a piece of theater, it has to have a reason to exist in the theater. Theater has to be relevant and resonate with the times. And we think this timeless story of Napoleon does resonate with these times.
And theatrical productions these days, the economics of putting on theatrical productions have sort of prohibited the so-called pre-Broadway or pre-London tours. So I guess you've had 30 years to sort of hone this project.
We really enjoyed the challenge of this invitation to the New York Music Theater Festival. Was it had a maximum cast of 15 and a maximum band size of 5. And here we were coming with this epic musical. So we thought, well, what do? We definitely wanted to take them up on the invitation. And so in the reframing of our story, we tell a backroom political drama, but we actually loved the process of dialing it back to boiling it down to its bare essence. So now we have 2 versions of the show that can be mounted: a small version, cast of 15, band of 5, or the larger version, which is played in Korea with that magnificent production there.
And now I'd like to welcome back to the program both Andrew and Timothy to set up the additional songs which they've written for Napoleon. So if you'd like to give us the background to Wounded, which we shall hear in French, so it also might be a great advantage to the non-French speaking listeners to set up the idea behind the song as well as where it fits into the storyline.
Right. Well, this song, Wounded, was actually added for the 2015 New York production. And in our reworking of the show, as we said, it starts very differently now than it used to. It starts on the battlefield of Waterloo. This is revealed to be a memory of Talleyrand's, where he wonders how a shining hero can go to the ghost of a once great man like this, Napoleon, in this state of defeat at Waterloo. And he takes us back in time. Waterloo frames the story now. And we're taken back in time to a very young, firebrand Napoleon. He's incredibly inspirational and full of passion and virtue. And he is on his native Corsica, having returned there from military school in Paris, the only education his family could afford. And he's witnessed the revolution happening in France, and he wants to bring its values to Corsica. But for his attempt at trying to overthrow the government, he is beaten, his family is outlawed, and he sings this song called Wounded, where, because the lyrics are in French, I will tell you that he's saying that the wounds he sustained, though he may be bloodied and broken, the wounds he sustained are nothing compared to the wounds he feels for the common man struggling to better himself in a world that oppresses the poor. This is sung by the wonderful Laurent Ban as Napoleon, who also did the French adaptation of the lyric.
Détesté, humilié, oh brisé, cher meurtri, ces blessures valent moins qu'une déchirure enfouie. Frappe ma peau jusqu'à saigner, cogne à me rendre sourd. Le plus dur est d'accepter que le mal s'infecte autour. Certains hommes sont dans le déni, à l'affût d'une dignité, humiliés de payer ce prix, car pour eux, point de respect. Mais pas moi, non, non pas moi. Nul autre ne m'imposera ce que je dois être ou pas. Sans privilège, je n'ai pas droit aux honneurs, seulement d'être un rêveur. Une vie d'ambition me serait interdite. Un destin sans renom, sans gloire et sans mérite. Une liste sans fin de haine et de mépris. Croyait-il me briser encore? Mais pas moi, non, non pas moi. Nul autre ne m'imposera ce que je dois être ou pas. C'est moi que rien sera bientôt quelqu'un. Voici mon Graal, je l'ai trouvé. Que sonne enfin ma vengeance pour rendre honneur à mon nom de naissance.
And that was Wounded.
And the next song, A Place Like Paris. I believe this is a new opening song, is it, to replace the one which takes place at the ball that we've heard in the Canadian cast recording?
We came up with this song, A Place Like Paris, actually for the 2023 French production in Seoul. And what we wanted to do was, as the brothers are kicked out of Corsica, they're coming to Paris to make their fame and fortune. And we wanted to set up Paris as a place that was, it's post-revolutionary France. And we wanted to really set up the brothers arriving in Paris, what Paris was like. And it's the beginning of the two of them, while Napoleon embraces the ideas of the revolution. His younger brother, Lucien, is the real sort of passionate idealist. And so we wanted to really show how Lucien begins to print these pamphlets and really push forward this idea of equality, fraternity, liberty, but gets arrested. And we show in this how Napoleon is able to, using his thinking, and he's much more organized in the way that he goes about it, to help his brother get out of prison. And we also introduce the debauched Paul Barras. And of course, Talleyrand, our narrator, shows us this is the corrupt current leader of Paris of France, who ultimately gets overthrown on the 18th of Brumaire.
Mm-hmm. And the performers singing this song are John Eisen singing Lucien, Christophe Serenot singing Talleyrand, and Laurent Ban singing Napoleon.
dans les rues de Paris, sans foi ni loi et va nu-pied.
À qui se fier dans les rues de Paris? Toujours sur ses gardes, c'est la clé. Voleurs, tricheurs, pigeons implumés, escrocs certifiés, pris en flag. Bagarres et crimes, notre à volonté, anarchie et violence font les rues de Paris.
Versons nos larmes pour les rues de Paris, loin de l'image qu'ils s'en faisaient. Au feu de la révolution bénie, les beaux lendemains ont déchanté.
Un roi sans tête repose désormais, fêtez la bête qui l'a remplacé.
Saluez Barras, chef de la nation,
Qui prend tout ce qui lui plaît.
Des rues de Paris, j'ai compris la raison. Il faut changer le monde. Aux quatre coins de la ville, je proclame que nous inondent des jours meilleurs. Que disparaisse le corrupteur. Des jours meilleurs, un monde digne, des convictions sur lesquelles on s'aligne. Des jours meilleurs.
le peuple change dans les rues de Paris. Et ce fut l'œuvre du petit frère. Puis un gratte-papier d'opposition promule le changement par la colère.
Ah bah Barras, il vous a trahi. Debout, battez-vous, c'est la guerre. La révolution en vaut le prix. Pourquoi vivre cet enfer? Des jours meilleurs,
arrêtez-le.
Un monde digne.
Faites-en un exemple qui s'incline.
Des jours meilleurs, un monde digne.
Des convictions sur lesquelles je m'aligne.
Des jours meilleurs, des jours meilleurs, des jours meilleurs.
Que vont-ils bien pouvoir faire de moi? J'ai peur de la sanction. Je suis bien moins brave que toi. Vont-ils m'exécuter?
Non, tu vas sortir, mais joue le jeu, on ne se connaît pas. Mon rang va nous être précieux.
J'ai confiance en toi.
Il nous faut comprendre une chose fondamentale, avoir un allié puissant et plus que vital. Garde, approchez, je vous dis, je n'ai pas toute la journée.
Oui, monsieur, mon capitaine.
Amenez-moi le prisonnier, je l'emmène pour son procès.
Bien, monsieur, puis-je voir les documents?
Je n'ai aucun document. Vous pensez que Barras a le temps pour la paperasse? Amenez-le-moi.
Mais monsieur...
Quel est votre nom, soldat? Je vais le donner à Barras et vous serez le prochain qu'il m'enverra chercher.
Tout à fait, monsieur. Entendu. Oui.
C'est la routine dans les rues de Paris, de petites ou grandes déceptions. On triche, on ment pour s'enfuir de prison ou pour se soustraire aux punitions. Travailler pour Barras me torture, obligé d'être son bras droit. J'assiste à tous ces crimes, sa luxure, je veux le voir tout en bas. Moi au sommet, hors de la fange, parmi les anges.
That was A Place Like Paris.
And the next new song that we'll hear is One Day.
Yes, this is One Day, and this is the Josephine solo that was added, as we said in our interview earlier. This was added as a result of going to the Netherlands and seeing that production and realizing that we needed to know more of Josephine's backstory. So when we meet Josephine in the story, she is the mistress of Paul Barras, who is the corrupt, debauched leader of the government. She doesn't want to be with him, but she's with him out of financial necessity because her first husband was beheaded in the revolution. He was an aristocrat. We learn in this story that Josephine grew up on the island of Martinique, where a fortune teller told her that one day she would be a woman greater than a queen. She can't see how that is possible in her circumstance with Paul Barras, but she escapes from this horrible relationship she has with him in her mind, going back to those days in Martinique where the fortune teller told her of this incredible future. This is One Day, and it's sung by Chiara Di Bari as Josephine.
ferme les yeux et loin d'ici, je redeviens la jeune fille, hors de ses murs et loin de lui, loin de ses actes, je m'enfuis. J'ai 17 ans, une gitane prédit mon destin. Un jour tu quitteras notre îlet, un jour fort bien marié, et personne n'aura tant brillé que toi en Martinique. Un jour des diamants, des parures, un jour couronne et forteresse, un jour tu seras une reine, déesse chimérique. Un jour j'ai tout quitté et je fus bien mariée, mais un jour vint un jour maudit et tout fut détruit. Le monde a basculé trop vite, il est parti, d'autres ont suivi. Les créatures dans l'ombre s'agitent, la seule issue est mon esprit. Je ferme les yeux et j'imagine la gitane me prédire. Un jour, plus besoin d'aucun pacte, un jour tu seras sauvé, blotti dans les bras d'un beau chevalier romantique. Un jour tes blessures guériront, enfin tu pourras aimer, et un homme fera de toi sa reine, son grand amour unique. Souvent je me sens mourir, qui me dira ce jour où un jour surgira celui qui me fera revivre.
That was One Day.
And the final song that we have from their score is Josephine's Death.
Josephine's Death was another song that we added for 2023. Josephine's Death has been one of those emotional beats in the show that we've really struggled with. And I think it's taken us 30 years to actually find a really good way in. After Russia, Napoleon is exiled on the island of Elba. And one of Josephine's best friends, Thérèse Tallien, who is a character that we see during the decadent post-revolutionary period, writes a letter to Napoleon, which he receives on the island of Elba. And we do it as a split shot with Napoleon on one side of the stage and Thérèse Tallien talking about the final hours of Josephine's death. Napoleon was forced to divorce Josephine. She was unable to provide him with an heir. As an emperor, he has to have an heir to carry on his legacy, his future. In divorcing Josephine, he was torn up by this, eventually decided to go ahead with it, casts her out, and then is remarried in a loveless marriage and ends up in that terrible situation of regret. And so this whole song deals with the news that she has died. Thérèse Tallien was there with her at the end, and Josephine's final words were to forgive Napoleon for what he did. For us, it's an opportunity to give a final beat for Napoleon and Josephine, even though she's dead. And 2023 was the first time we'd ever seen it play in front of an audience. We wrote it specifically to try and land the end of their arc. And it was so powerful. We were so happy that I think we finally nailed it. Hopefully you feel the same.
And the singers in this recording are Tatiana Matra as Therese, Laurent Ban as Napoleon, and Chiara De Barry as Josephine.
Terrestalien, rue de Babylone, 29 mai 1814. Des nouvelles de Rose qui ne sont pas bonnes. Je vous annonce sa mort précoce. Ce fut rapide, un coup de froid qui très vite l'emporta. Avant de mourir, elle voulait que je vous passe un message dans la paix qu'elle attendait en toute sérénité. Dis-lui, j'ai pardonné, je l'ai tant aimé. Je l'attendrai pour l'éternité.
Comment peut-elle me pardonner? Tant d'amertume sans dignité. Dans l'océan de mes pensées chavirent tous mes regrets. Au soleil couchant, la nuit fatale où je t'ai rencontré, tous deux au jour mourant, dans les étoiles nous resterons gravés. Tu étais mon seul univers, nul retour en arrière. Tous mes désirs secrets liés à toi. Et sans toi, plus rien ne compte pour moi. Loin de toi, comment vivrais-je ici-bas? Toi ma lumière, petite lumière. J'ai cru pouvoir te posséder, oubliant tout le reste, bien que j'ai toujours su. Je t'aspirais, je t'ai rêvé la première fois. Oui, je suis fou de toi.
Là, sous les étoiles, comme un signal, le monde entre nos mains. Cette nuit demeurera un chant du cœur qui brûlera en toi. Ressens les braises du désir, le vois-tu qui s'enflamme d'une passion qui embrase mon âme. Et je le sais, ce feu sera toujours en moi. Sans toi,
Plus rien ne compte pour moi. Loin de toi, je ne veux plus vivre ici-bas. Joséphine, pardonne-moi, mon si beau trésor. Je t'ai tellement blessé.
je pardonne,
Je ne t'ai pas mérité.
je pardonne. La terre peut bien s'écrouler.
Ne me laisse pas. Je t'en prie, reste.
Nous serons unis suffit.
Me laisse pas,
Ténéreux,
je t'en prie,
libère
reste.
ton fardeau.
That was Josephine's death.
Thank you very much. And my thanks once again to Andrew Sabiston on the line from Toronto in Canada and Timothy Williams on the line from Los Angeles in California. And once again, every success with future productions of the show. And thank you for taking the time to speak to us in Australia today.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's such an honor to chat with you. And thank you for honoring us on this 30th anniversary to the day of this Toronto production. It means so much to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. A real honor.
Bye for now.